Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. The title is nothing around everything. And so the title is inspired out of a certain analysis of Carl Jung. And I will tell you this, that the title I was also thinking of calling it is everything surrounded by nothing. So whoever's listening, you can also treat that this episode has two titles, two names, as if is everything surrounded by nothing, or is nothing around everything? Now, it is the case that we are creatures that in front of our eyes we find an outer realm which is object oriented. Behind our eyes we find our inner realm which is subject oriented. Now the nature of how a subject is kept in the moment is very different than the nature of how an object is held. An object seems to be made of smaller particles. In some sense it is contained in many different ways before we see the object. And when it comes to the psychology of the human being, we have attempted to kind of break it down, look at the psyche, just like we broke down we broke down atoms to find subatomic particles. We've had psychologists like Carl Jung, wonder about the nature of the. Sorry guys, I got distracted for a second. What was I saying? Oh yeah, people like Carl Jung and psychologists, they have studied this. They have wondered what is the simplest particle of the mind in some sense. And so what happened is, just like we see an object and scientifically we see it's made of smaller particles, Carl Jung came and saw that in some sense behind, it's like there is a hidden alphabet in the mind. Certain ways the mind is behaving that is not conscious to the mind. Now, in an interview, Carl Jung is asked, "Do you believe in God?" People can look this up if they want. He says, the interviewer asks him in this broadcast and says, Carl Jung, do you believe in God? And Carl Jung is about to give an answer, but then he pauses as if he's like kind of laughing in his inner realms. He says, "No, I know God. I don't need to believe in him." Now, what happens is after that interview, so many people message Carl Jung. They're like, "Carl Jung, what did you mean? What do you mean you know God? You don't believe in God, but you know God?" Carl Jung writes a letter in response. And in it was the idea that I felt it had some value to be shared with audiences, where Carl Jung says that God to him is like a circle where the center of the circle is everything and the circumference is nothing. And in his letter he says that he has come across a superior will in the contents of his own psyche, in the domain of his own psyche. You see, we have an inner realm, that's your individual life, whoever's listening. And then you have your outer realm. Your outer realm is your collective life. Do you know? Because sometimes I think about it, why am I not in a solipsistic universe? Why am I not just the only one here? Why am I not the God of every moment? As a form, as a shape, I mean. So I was really thinking about this, and it was such a fascinating. I mean, I have wondered about the dualistic notions in the world. Of course, I have wondered about what it means to have a God in this world, and what it means to not have one. What it means to see the world first before seeing the self, and what it means what it means seeing the self first before the world. You see, religion is in some sense seeing the self before the world. We are seeking salvation for the self, and we're treating the world as a free will. But in the scientific lens, we're not treating it. We're not treating the world as a personality. The world is like this unknown engine. That means you can say cosmic divinity is opening up, scientific divinity is opening up the hood of an engine and realizing how it works. I would tell you that in my experience in this life, that every action has a value, has a complementing or a respective emotion. And of course, people are different. Their value systems are different. You know, everybody's inner realm, their complete evaluation of who they are is different, but we adjust and relate it to the outer realms. What that means is, back in the day when they said survival of the fittest, that means they would come and say, hey man, you see that red stuff coming from the mountain? That's lava. It's going to kill you. Maybe you should move. And the person was so caught in their inner realms, they're like, I'll never move. My parents lived here. My ancestors lived here. I'm never going to move from this mountain. You know? And so if the person doesn't adjust their inner realm to the outer realm, they cannot continue in the outer realm. You have to honor the laws of the physical universe. You know, this is physics, and it's being a universe. You know, for me, when I speak about mysticism, I'm not running to it. I have an honor for science. But the issue is, science is limited to the variables of its findings. Do you know? That means it's like, let me tell you how I feel the scientific endeavor is trying to answer the world. It's as if you're asking someone, do you know how to make a cake? And they're like, if I have the right ingredients, yes. If all the ingredients are there, if everything is there, of course I know how to make a cake, you know? So the type of finding I find of an absolute nature, it is impossible to attain by a scientific understanding. Why? Because science doesn't realize that there is a lot of irrational behavior. That means if you were a scientist right now and you conducted the most accurate experiment, you're going to realize that you're sharing this in a world where people have emotional dimensions to their decision making. You know, that means we are acting rational in a world where actually like 50% of the time there's an emotion. There is a comparative system of selfhood from different moments. You know, as I'm speaking to you now, trust me, behind my eyes I am roaming around different memories. You know, I say it often, but I don't know how many people consider it. I say there's something called as ego vision. Ego vision means in any moment in your life, in whatever local complexity, you can go to a simple non-locality and observe it. That means little do we know that it's like we think everything has to be in a certain way, not realizing that every phenomena has so many angles it can be approached. Right now, I'm holding this cup of water with my left hand. You know, someone in the world is holding a cup of water with their right hand. You know, it's like so many ways the same phenomena can be given force to move. And so anyways, to bring this back to the Jungian, Carl Jung's perspective, this mighty general of the psyche, you know, I consider Carl Jung to be one of the great commanders of the unconscious. He cared. For me, Carl Jung, people may feel he's a genius because of his very linear work, but for me, his genius was his compassion, that he cared for the unknown to shield the notion of the living unknown from the known mind. You see, knowledge is very strange. It's as if we are making something lifeless. The Sufis would say this, that if you only try to live this life in an intellectual way, only with just a pure calculation, you can say, as if every moment of your life is a specific outcome, I would say it's like this, that the Sufis would say the path of intellect alone, there's nothing wrong with the intellect, but alone, it's like whipping a dead donkey and expecting it to go faster. You see, the effort of knowledge was caging something into the familiar. So what actually is happening is we are never seeing people. We have experienced other types of personalities in our life, and when we see a new person, it's as if it's as if they're a puzzle piece trying to fit into the familiarity of how the mind has pieced itself together. When you solve a puzzle, you see, the cool thing about solving a puzzle is you can start anywhere. And if life puzzles you, you can start anywhere to start placing the pieces, you know. I feel Carl Jung saw, you know, this notion of God as everything being the center of the circle, because we notice that existence has arrived to the scene. Existence has arrived before we were experiencing existence. That's how cool and mysterious the situation is, you know. People, they occupy themselves with many activities, but how many human beings can say that they know what the human being is? That means we're living lives without knowing what we are. Isn't that mind-blowing? You know, we're just living so casually. Life is this, life is that, not realizing life is neither this or neither that. Life is a film that hasn't finished yet. A film that we are not the only director of. We can at most direct the actions of the character. Many environments I have gone to, and I have noticed that it's as if before I can even speak, the environment has held its banners high. So I find it fascinating that in life we see, as if when we think of the universe from, at least, let's entertain the Big Bang Theory, from the notion of the Big Bang, it was something invisible. You can say it's like we created the word for potential. Honestly, if secular society didn't have the word potential, it would. And of course, when I say secular society, I mean we got to understand, religion has had quite an entrance on this planet. And no ideological system is here to rule it all. It doesn't make sense, you know? It's like this is what's going on Earth. Human beings are like plants in a garden, and these plants are fighting over which color of a petal is truth. Not realizing that the eyes of man surpass color. Marcus Aurelius would say the soul is dyed with the colors of its thoughts. Dyed, the word also means D-Y-E-D, means coloring something back in the day, coloring cloth. They would dye cloth. And so Marcus Aurelius says the soul is dyed with the color of its thoughts. What that means is you actually, as a human being, don't have a personality. You're a presence of unknown attention looking at a known landscape. Now, when you go to a known room, any room, right now I'm sitting in my porch, I cannot ignore how the environment is part of the content of my mind. You see, it's as if the environment is being a visible voice in the psyche, you know? This is something that I don't know how many people have truly wondered. It's one of the most beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful things about philosophy, why philosophy exists, is that philosophy is what happens when you wonder what your mind, why it's like how a mind is here. Back in the day, there was no philosophy. There was just human beings, and they'd open their eyes. They'd be in a very simple way of living, and they'd be like, "Where am I? What is this?" And philosophers were born. Philosophers are actually people on the roller coaster ride who are looking at the roller coaster. And there's some people who don't. They get on the roller coaster ride of this life and they keep their eyes closed. And keeping your eyes closed in this world is equivalent to boxing your head in an ideology that doesn't let you actually live your life. You know, language is not man's owner. Man owned language. Man brought it forth. It was as if we noticed fire and be incorporated in our technologies. We noticed one day, yo, can I connect an abstract symbol to an object? No way! You know, and everything began becoming named. It seemed to be like an evolutionary activity that we had to do, as if this world was so boring that we started naming it, you know? And honestly, names are very powerful. That's why I say it's an advanced technology. You know, it's as if you can't see someone, and you let's say you're on a ladder and you can't see who entered the room. Okay, and you ask your friend who's there, and let's say a friend of yours is there, and the friend says it's like your other friend who came. So you begin to see that names import information. Language is here to teleport reality between our minds. That means before we had telephones to teleport information from the inner realms of one being to the inner realms of another, it was language. Language was the phone back in the day. You know, that means speaking. Literally, people would travel like days on horseback to get to a town just to hear a story of another way the world was happening. You know? For me, I looked at this life and I'm like, all right, here's the issue. If I want it to be like the past, I'm going to want it to be slow, but it's actually speeding up. The only solution to actually be able to have, I find, the character, will, and strength to live in this world is either you have to hover as a non-dualistic presence, or if you are choosing to be an individual personality, you have to work. I'm not joking. Like, who knew? We have to work in metaphysics too. It's not that. You know, it's like Rumi says this, you got to work as hard as you work in the visible realms, you got to work as hard in the invisible. What does that mean? That means I got to be right back, guys. Hang on. Okay, I'm back. You know, probably for the audience, it feels they're like, "Oh my God, did Mr. Within jump into a portal?" You know, every day, guys, every day, every day when I open my eyes, I'm entering a portal. So I would say that right now in front of me, I'm drawing it. All right, we got a circle, we got the center of the circle. If we start from the circle, so I guess if Carl Jung is saying that God is the center of the circle, and is saying if God is a circle and the center of it is everything, and the circumference is nothing. Therefore, the meaning of our lives, because we seem to be going from emptiness to nothing and then back to emptiness to nothing, so technically we are oscillating in this circle. I wish I could show you this shape. Pretty much I'm drawing a circle, putting a center in it, but then drawing a sine wave that is going through the whole thing. It becomes something like this. Kind of strange. It's like I drew a clover in a circle. You know what it is? It's like two infinity signs in a circle, you know? Two infinity signs with the same point, one vertical, one horizontal. They're kind of like airplane propellers inside a circle. You know, now I'm saying that this is a movement from nothing to everything. You know, because I have looked at it this way, that there has to, if the world is dualistic, and if there's a dynamism of movement, then it gives you actually two choices of movement. In this life, you can go from everything to nothing, or from nothing to everything. So you can say, if Carl Jung saw God as a circle, going from the center to the circumference is, in some sense, you can say, a sort of, how would I say this? If the center is everything, okay, so we can say religion is seeing from the center of the circle to the out, and science is seeing from the circumference towards the center of the circle. Or it could be the opposite. I should probably say the opposite. Because you see, in the religious mindset, they see a singular source and everything's from that. So you can see a religious person, like sitting beside Carl Jung, would be like, yeah, man, the center of the circle is where the party is at. You know, but then you see a very secular person will look and say, no, the center of the circle doesn't have a meaning, doesn't have a value. It's just a point. It's actually when we go towards the circumference where we find the space of the meaning of life. So in this world, you can choose to see a path of ascension. You can choose to see a path of descension. You can think everything went to nothing, nothing went to everything, but Mr.Within will tell you they're playing tag. Chaos and order are playing tag in this dimension. It's as if two gods are chasing one another, the god of chaos and the god of order, the ultimate perception that things have design, a sort of rhythm, and things don't. Because what is order? It is a sort of abidance by a reference. The poet Rumi says, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a place. I will meet you there. And when the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about. You see, it's the whole notion of attaining unconditional joy, you know. What that means is many people are looking for happiness, but because they're looking for it in a system, in a systematic way, their happiness has no choice to be conditional. That means when you have a certain object, when you have a certain situation of life, you suddenly feel happy. But there are those who find a realization that because the inner realms are evocational and it's the content of the mind that suggests happiness, so in some sense, if the person can notice their inner realms, the context could be there. You know, it's this strange thing, I don't know, somehow it was in my nature, where when things are, the odds are against me, I become a simple fool. You know, when the odds are not against me, you know, the complex walk continues, you know. Honestly, Charles in the chat section says order is in agreement. I'll tell you, order is like 2 points in a line drawn between it. You know, or you can say order is a single point in chaos. So you can say the order of language was the alphabet. Imagine back in the day somebody was like, a new world order is going to come. You know, and people are like, what do you mean? And let's say it was mathematics, literally a language that is explaining, you know, the classification of reality. Language is honestly brilliant. We are brilliant ants on an anthill. It's like a brilliant hill. We have to consider that there is a self we can know, and there is a self you can try as hard as you want, you cannot know it. It is on the unknown self. It is your presence. I keep telling people, your presence is your whole moment. Your personality is a content, is a relationship of fragments of the moment. You know, so you can say, if chaos is the whole moment, order is a simulation, is an illusion. If order is the whole moment, chaos is an illusion. It's as if we can treat the universe right now as if it's freaking out, and we're like, what would the universe be like if it wasn't freaking out? You see, it's like, that's how complex it is trying to see the precision of order and chaos in the realm. You don't know if order is chaos is a type of order, or if order is a type of chaos. Because in political science, we know this, because there is the different ways human beings have responded to what they have had. Do you know politics is a game of, you can say, those who knew what was in their hand and those who didn't. That's just all of politics to me. Politics is like who saw. That's it. Because it's like, even when a person votes for a person, they're voting for someone that their reality feels similar to. It's as if that person is looking at the world with similar eyes as the person voting for them, you know. For me, it's strange. Some moments of life, when I look at the design, there is endless meaning. Like, how can a design not have meaning? A design, by its mere existence, is the meaning. That means, isn't it hilarious that we see a tree, but then we see an objective tree? I'm looking at a tree outside of my yard right now, but the subjective word tree, we see that too, but we don't see it with these eyes. So it's as if we have two pairs of eyes in one body. Or you can say it's like the brain hemispheres. One of them is like freaking out about emptiness. One of them is freaking out about how everything is filled, how there's so much stuff here. You know, like, what's better than being in a universe? You know, I mean, like, here's the thing. Fermi's paradox states, like, where are the aliens? Okay? Now, in Fermi's paradox, we are saying, where are the aliens? But can you imagine we were born in a solar system where it was only the Earth and the Sun? There was no other planets. Like, for me, all the planets that remain in our solar system, they are future objectives. They're literally, we're like an empire. We're like a kingdom of humanity, and we're like, one day we're going to get interstellar, and we're going to get to see, you know, the edges of the light in the room. For me, there's two factors about any species on any planet. I mean, it depends on the gravity of the planet, because gravity has an influence on your psychology. That means I could see, if there was anti-gravity, if literally a person could jump like 10 meters in the air or 20 meters in the air, conversations would be very short. Do you know? That means I honestly feel, if we had a lot of energy, like, imagine a humanity where nobody ever gets tired. Can you imagine that? A world where nobody ever gets tired. Like, what would dialogue be in that world? What would meaning be in a world where there's no sleep? Imagine there was no experiential oscillation from the conscious to the unconscious. There was just full consciousness. You were just born once and you never went to sleep. You know, I mean, honestly, if there wasn't sleep, we would totally have an impression of immortality. So we would think that it's like, how do we know? How do we know? And can you imagine, like, we had evolved in a way where there was no such thing as sleep? Can you imagine that? Imagine, like, the creature hadn't figured out it could sleep. It was just endless, like it had evolved to have 24/7 power. Even in night, it would have energy, you know? Honestly, I think it should be like this. You see, there are stones in a desert. For example, I saw this in a video where it showed, like, if you ever get caught in a desert, at night the desert gets really cold, you know? So what this person who was in a desert, like, the strategy is, there's rocks in a desert sometimes, and these rocks absorb the heat of the sun the whole day, so at night they become warm. So what that means is, if you're stuck in a desert, you just find a bunch of rocks that have absorbed heat and you make yourself like a sort of warm shelter or something. So just like that, I think, as if, like, what if we evolved in a way where in the day nobody moved, we just soaked in sunlight, and at night we had incredible levels of energy, you know? And sometimes I think about it, you know, I feel that we should work outdoors. I was thinking about how to even design educational classrooms in the future. I remember in this essay I wrote, this was years ago, like 4 years ago, I wrote this idea that, imagine classrooms being made of glass walls in the middle of the forest. So imagine, like, kids, you know, in a classroom in the middle of the forest that's made of glass, like this whole glass wall school, you know? I wouldn't say whole glass wall school, that would be distracting, but I would say, like, imagine just a classroom in the middle of the forest made of glass, and as the teacher is talking about bears, a wild bear comes outside, you know? It's like, I don't know, the way that I feel our corporate culture, just the way our work has begun, it's like we're creatures that when the sun comes out, when we go to work, we're indoors. It's too much indoor work. It's as if we're ants that go in the ground when the sun comes out, you know? Imagine we created this sort of system where, I'm just thinking, in a world, if there was no sleep, if people didn't have to sleep, imagine there was some sort of juice. Some company was like, immortal juice, we did it. That was their whole marketing. We did it. And so this immortal juice would make you no longer need to even sleep. So you had 24/7 energy. So that would make a life where in the morning you would just live a casual life, and at night you would work because you wouldn't need sleep. So the issue is, we have to actually try to make a system where a person gets the same amount of, let's say, minimum wage income for half the hour of work. What I mean by that is, like, I mean, honestly, a lot of labor jobs are going to be, in the next 30, let's say in the next 50 years, they're going to be replaced by automation. So eventually the human being will be left to move their mind. We're actually, whether we know it or not, indirectly building a civilization for minds moving bodies, not bodies that are going to move minds. So it's like, we should enjoy it while we can. You know, I'll tell you, enjoy your individualism. Don't let it be a source of suffering. It's a rare opportunity. In the future, there may be children born who they cannot fathom their consciousness outside of a computer program, you know? You know, the way Carl Jung, the way that Carl Jung in that interview says to the interview, interviewer, I don't believe in God, I know God. He said it in such a way, it was so like badass, you know. Carl Jung was like, buddy, believe in God, I know God, you know? It's like I have him on speed dial. Oh man. For me, it's all language is just a dimension. We're going to mature beyond it as experiential rhythms. We shouldn't fear this. Human beings should use their ability to speak to give, to fill to fill the gaps of the world. You know, that means what free will is literally like as if a sentence, and some part of the sentence is blank, and it's like insert any word here. That's free will. Where life is like the sentence structure isn't your choice, but the word in that moment is. You know, the expression of the moment is. Guys, I want to read you some quotes from an Indian mystic named Kabir. And Kabir is a very, very wise, illiterate, of course. He was an illiterate but enlightened fellow. He was someone who had seen the world regardless of the language in his mind. There are people like that, of course. You know, don't think speech is the most sophisticated state of the mind. Silence is the most sophisticated state. That means it's like you don't understand. The advanced communicators, silence is where sometimes you receive the most advanced communication. That means there's moments in my life where I just for a second put my ego, put the story of my life for that day on pause, and I just watch the world. It's as if for a second, like a busy salesman, just for a second stepping out of the store, smoking a cigarette, and just looking at the world, you know? Like, what is this? There's something so awesome. Something so awesome about an undisturbed victory. And the only way you can have a flawless victory is a victory of your mind. The body's victories has flaws. What that means is this body is designed to just, you know what it feels like? It's literally our biological bodies, they feel like to me like fire extinguishers that we gotta use to get rid of the fire of the past to build the future. You know, it's as if like, imagine a child tries something, fails. What do we normally see the parent do? The parent goes to the child, oh, honey, it's okay. Don't worry. You know, you're going to try again. You know, you tried your best, you know. But imagine a child that says, I'm terrible at this. I can't do this. This is not for me. And imagine a parent that looks at the child and says, how do you know? How do you know that you don't know? Do you see how beautiful the sky can be when the clouds have faded? Do you see the clarity of human nature? That it's like there is nothing to hold. We are leaving this world with empty pockets, atomically speaking. I mean, atoms don't die, but we do, you know? The atoms are like, yeah, sorry guys, you know, sorry human personality, that seems to be a hallucination of an electromagnetic field, you know? It's like, you know, you're gonna leave, but we're gonna still chill as stardust for eons and eons and eons, yeah. So anyways, let's go to into the Kabir quote tunnel. Kabir says, many have died. You also will die. The drum of death is being beaten. The world has fallen in love with a dream. Only sayings of the wise will remain. Kabir says all know that the drop merges into the ocean, but few know that the ocean merges into the drop. Kabir says, but if a mirror ever makes you sad, you should know that it does not know you. You are not the reflection in the mirror. You're all that that reflection can do. You know, it's like some human beings, they're pushed into static states of mind. In my childhood, I personally was, but I wasn't pushed by others. I was pushed by karma. Karma pushed me out of my own freedom. But it was good, because sometimes in youth, it's the best time to be a fool. And when you're young, be as foolish as you want, you know? It's like you have a fool-free card, you know? You do something when you're young, and they're like, why'd you do this? And you're like, I didn't know better. And they're like, oh, you know, innocence of the fool. Kabir says, if you want the truth, I'll tell you the truth. Listen to the secret sound, the real sound, which is inside you. How there is an inseparability to the voice of humanity and the voice of the Logos. That means the Logos is being human for a little while. Kabir says, the river that flows in you also flows in me, as if consciousness is not limited to form. Form is limited to consciousness. Kabir says, what is God? Oh, okay, so I got to tell you the full quote here. The quote site isn't giving the full quote. So Kabir actually asks one of his disciples, and he shouts and he says, disciple, tell me, what is God? He shouts it at the disciple. And the disciple instantly says, he is the breath inside the breath. The inconceivable energy source of the conceivable formed energy. Who knew space was alive through matter? It's not just matter that's an illusion of life. Kabir says love does not grow on trees, or love is not grown on trees or bought in the market. But if one wants to be loved, one must first know how to give unconditional love. Yeah, I mean, when you do something out of an unconditional state, there's no karma, because you had no opinion on it. But if you have an opinion on your own action before you do it, the inner realm consequence of that will happen. This is why so many people, when they go to speak, they become nervous, because they feel that their existence isn't justified by them moving it. So many people don't feel that if they move themselves, they feel wrong. They feel as if they're not being true to maybe their emotional safety of their upbringing. But let me tell you, in this life, you're a sheep until you suddenly realize you're a lion. And then as a lion, you're no longer the lion. You become the lion's roar. You become in how you just see this world and walk towards it and hold its hand and just endure, you know. Kabir says, if you don't break your ropes while you're alive, do you think ghosts will do it after? Kabir says, wherever you are is the entry point. Yeah, that means the confusion of eons can be resolved with the clarity of an instant. Kabir says, the sun is within me and so is the moon. He has understood where form is happening. Kabir says, I read that. Kabir says, I don't think there's such a thing as an intelligent, mega-rich person. For who with a fine mind can look out upon this world and hoard what can nourish 1,000 souls? Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to holding something that you don't use. You know, that means it's probably for ideological value. You know, it's like we don't want to, it's like we're not thinking physically, or we would have solved world hunger yet. There's another dimension of mind where we have desires that make us maintain the physicality. Like, here's the thing, it's like when you don't have a sword, you're like, why should everybody have a sword? Why should some people have 2 swords? You know? But when you have a sword, then it's like when somebody says, why do you have a sword? Then you're like, hey man, then what? You want me to be empty-handed? You know? the system is very complex. Like this capitalistic system, most likely it needs a challenger. It needs another challenging, efficient system emerging right beside it, and then the integration of both systems would be the solution to capitalism. Kabir says, do not keep the slanderer away. Treat him with affection and honor, body and soul. He scours all clean, babbling about this and that. Kabir says, you have left your beloved and are thinking of others, and this is why your work is in vain. That means it's like your work doesn't have a heart, so it's an empty mind. That can't happen. I learned that the hard way. That if you desire the unknown is like, what the fuck, man? You know, it's like you don't even know what's going on, and you want something from the world you can't see. You know, that's how the unknown is. The unknown is really like walking on ice and not knowing if it's going to break. Mysticism is not for the faint of heart. It's for those who actually want to know their heart. Kabir says, whether I be in the temple or in the balcony, in the camp or the flower garden, I tell you truly that every moment my Lord is taking his delight in me. Kabir says, when at last you are come to the ocean of happiness, do not go back thirsty. Yeah, what he means is a lot of people get insight from their inner realms, but they don't pull the string completely and they return. They don't go to the end. Do you know that means? Remember, the ego's last refuge is wisdom. What that means is the only way, like imagine, you know what it is? I'll tell you a story. This is a story that actually comes to us from the Islamic world, you can say, from the Islamic context. And so back in the day, there was this story. It's not a religious story, but it's in an Islamic context. And the story was this man who believes in a monotheistic one God view. He sees that there's a bunch of people worshiping a tree. He sees a bunch of people worshiping a tree, and he goes up to them, and he's like, "What is this? There's like, what is this? This tree isn't a god. This tree is a tree. You know, there's only one true God, and it's inconceivable, and it's the source of everything. You know." So technically, in how the story unfolds, is the guy goes and gets an axe. And keep in mind, it's in a religious context. So the guy goes and gets an axe, and he's about to cut this tree. He's like, you guys are fools for worshiping this tree. And he's about to cut the tree, and the people are shouting, no, don't, stop it. Don't take our God away from us, you know. Suddenly the story goes that the archetype of Shaitan, Satan, or the fallen angel Lucifer arises. Suddenly, the evil of the archetype of malevolence, you can say, you know, of ignorance, or I would say ignorance, the archetype of ignorance. That's a safe way to give the concept of the fallen angel of value. It's an ignorance. You fall because you ignored something. You know, you didn't step on the mountain properly. And so anyways, so what happens is that the archetype of Shaitan through a human form arises to this person and tells them, I'm not going to let you cut this tree. Like as if that force wants ignorance to remain, and then this guy is like, no man, I want to cut the tree, you know. And so what happens is they get into a fist fight. They get into a physical fight, and the guy who wanted to cut the tree is stronger somehow, and he defeats it, and he's like, I win, and he's about to cut the tree. And this is where they say the archetype of ignorance, you know, it attacks a person's character. So in a theological standpoint, it's like the archetype of Shaitan or Satan. It attacks a man's character. There's that sort of narrative. So what happens in this story is the guy is about to cut the tree, And suddenly this archetype of ignorance says, don't! I'm gonna give you 3 gold coins, man. Every night I'm gonna give you 3 gold coins behind your door. And the guy suddenly, his hand stops. His hand stops. He doesn't cut the tree. And he says 3 gold coins. That was like a lot of money back in the day, you know. It's like gold coins. And so the guy suddenly, he doesn't cut it, and the guy says, the shaitan says to the guy that what does he say? He says, every night I'm going to put 3 gold coins behind your door. And the guy says the coins better be there, and he leaves, and the people continue worshiping the tree. And after the guy leaves, there is a laughter in the void, for visual effect purposes for the story. Sound effects, yeah. Now what happens is that the man goes, and it becomes midnight, and he goes outside of his door, you know, and he actually waits, and he hears the knock. He goes and opens the door. He sees 3 gold coins, and he's like, nice. He gets the gold coins. The next day happens. There's another knock at midnight, and he sees there's 3 gold coins. He's like, nice. Remember the archetype of ignorance had told him, Shaitan had told the guy that I'm gonna put gold coins every night behind your door. That means endless money. Now, what happens is that the guy, the third night, sees the money isn't there. And the guy's like, this is bullshit, I'm going to go cut the tree. And he gets an axe, and the next day he's going to cut the tree, and the worshippers are freaking out, those who are worshipping the tree. And suddenly Shaitan appears, in human form, the same archetype appears. And the archetype of ignorance, in some sense, suddenly says, I'm not going to let you cut this tree. And the guy's like, you didn't send the money, fuck you, you know, like something like that, you know. And so they get in a fight, but this time something strange happened. Consider that it's been like a couple days since they last fought. And so what happens is that this time when they fight, Shaitan is stronger, and he defeats the guy. And the guy is shocked, and he says, how? How is it that you were stronger? How was it that when we fought before I was stronger than you? And how is it that you're stronger now? And then Shaitan gives the moral of the story, as how the story is made. Like, gives the moral of the story to the guy. And he says, because before you were fighting for the truth. You were fighting for the truth. You were doing something out of a real impulse. But the next time you came to cut the tree because the money wasn't there. Do you see? It was as if like there was an impurity to behavior. You see, in regards to a psychological framework. So it was as if the person was honest, then they dishonestly wanted to cut the tree. And so that was the moral of the story, right? That in this life, if you don't care for your eyes, the eyes of others will overpower you. The outer realm is not designed for now to care. Right now, we don't have an advanced civilization that will assist the human being, that becomes a guardian angel of the human being. We don't have that kind of civilization. You know, of course, we have many incredible public servants. We have a hero civilization where we have heroes. But we don't have the whole civilization being advanced like a hero. You know, a civilization that is so advanced, it doesn't need heroes. The heroes can go and live their lives, actually. It's like, who knew? The Hulk always wanted to paint, you know? In mystical traditions, when you look at the relationship they have with voices that, as Immanuel Kant would say, is from noumenon, not phenomenon. I don't know how many people know the word noumenon, but it is literally phenomenon that relates to the experiencer, that is not an object. You know, I would say the noumenon is your inner realms. It was Immanuel Kant's way as a continental philosopher. It's epic. Every continental philosopher has had their way, you know, of entering language with new eyes. So noumenon means the phenomenon going on behind your eyes, pretty much. And this phenomenon, it is honestly moving like weather. I haven't gotten really upset, and like, even though life has had its, elevations for me, but I haven't been disturbed in this life. Do you know? What I mean is that karmically, in before 2011, I was in what I would call, in some of my writings I called it, in some of the talks I called it as a karmic quarantine. That means you might not believe this, but it was such a unique experience. It was as if my inner realms was unauthorizing my desire. That means I could attempt my desire, but the moment I would do, there would be an avalanche of upsetting events. And it wasn't a desire like just desiring to drink water from a cup, or I don't know. Sometimes my desires, they're honestly like weather. They're like a bird that flies in the sky. You just notice it for a moment, you know? And the cool thing is that anyone tries this. I mean, of course, every person is different, but the easiest way I've found a way to calm down the savageness of any desire has been lying down on the ground. I can tell you some of the moments, it's anybody who is stressed or upset or whatever, you have to lie down on the ground. Wherever you are, just lie down. Just lie down on the floor. Let your soul feel humble for a moment. I feel art is conscious divinity. I feel art is revelation. I feel our lives have a novelty component to them. That's why we're living them. Because there's some factors we just don't know. Now, if we freak out about the unknown, we don't study the known properly. And even if we attempt to study the known, there's so much unknown that we're like, who do we know this for? Like, why do I know knowledge? Because there's something you hear, right? That you hear a lot of teachers in, for example, the educational system, they give teachings, but it's as if they're throwing something at the student. They're not telling the student how to catch it. Imagine like, somebody who doesn't know how to pitch, you're throwing like baseballs at him. So the person's going to be like, why is this happening? Why am I here in this room? But if the person understands the baseball bat they can have in their hand, then whatever baseball is thrown at them, can happen, Because what is philosophy? The permission of imagination and reality to sit at one table and fathom what is the design here. That means, what if our design of intelligence is not comprehensible? Because just like how we can't see the roots of the tree, the roots of the source of the mind are maybe in another dimension. Just like the roots of the tree are in a soil we can't see in, we have to dig it. What if the unconscious mind is literally what if the unconscious, as Carl Jung says, is literally a soil, and our conscious life is the tree outside of the soil. So knowledge is branched out. Now when we go to our roots, we come to the unconscious. You come to the unconscious anytime you reverse engineer back towards your memories. If you just as a person were like, all right, all right, I got this phenomenon called memory. Let me see, what is this? Can I remember everything at any moment, or does it come and go on its own, or is thought, is the inner realms automated like a dream, or can you be conscious of your inner realms? You know, because I had an experience where in a dream I moved, I woke up and I was like, wait a minute. So my body was inactive on the bed, just existing in a slumber, but my mind managed to create a body where in the dream state, with the dream body, I could move. I could go left and right in the dream. So I woke up being like, how do I know the mind has stopped dreaming? And that's the thing. The dream that they were like, the yogis, that they were like, life is a dream. It's the layer of mind that is occurring. That is it, guys. That is it. It's not that existence is actually a dream. Existence is not a dream. Experience is like, the mind is like a layer of the onion. You know, it's like an onion layer. Where it's encapsulating something superior, where the constitution of matter is limited to the whole chicken and egg dilemma of which came first, consciousness or matter. If consciousness came first, we are not matter. If matter came first, we have, our consciousness is an illusion. Two routes, and human beings can choose. You know, it's as if living on this planet, there is nothing to believe. What are you believing in a changing world? I'm surprised to know that people have beliefs in a changing world. It's impossible to even have the same belief. Why? Even if you had the same belief, let's say the belief was a book, every day you wake up, you're different. I mean, you can get the clue from the cells of your body, you know, that you don't have the same physical body as you had 10 years ago, 20 years ago. For humorous reasons, maybe 1,000 years. But you don't have the same body as you had 10 years ago, and you do not have the same mind. So technically, what is this? That we're waking up and we're like, it's a new day, I'm going to be a new self, but we're believing in the same thing? We're being a new self, but believing in the same thing? How is that possible? There's a paradox here. You know, this is how society is truly a theater performance, where we are actors not realizing the scripts we're in. And I'm telling you, this explains it. I think, at least for me, it explains it. You know, somebody may be listening to me right now. It's being, what language is this guy speaking? And somebody's going to be like, English, and then the person's going to be like, no, but really, what language is? From like, what planet is this language? I'm telling you guys, language was an inner realm, was spontaneous. We are actually, creativity cannot be defined. It's spontaneous dynamism. You know, I breathe like an artist. Every breath is like artwork to me. You know, I consider my 80-year-old grandfather, who is alive currently, who was a businessman in Iran. And when I go see him, I notice how important events are and how important it is how you create the memories for your future self. Because when my grandfather was, when he was 80, he was just talking about his, um, like, you know, 30s, or even earlier than that, his late 20s, where he attained some sort of wealth, you know. And from work, like he started working at the age 12 and then found a way, you know. But anyways, when I go speak to him, he keeps going back to his success. He keeps going back to victory. And I think this is something that perhaps many women on this planet, maybe they do not realize about the male archetype, that it needs to have victory or it will feel defeated to itself. That means the same way you see that in the feminine mindset, there is an equality for everybody, as if the mother's grace treating all her children equally, but the father is not there to treat the children equally. Do you know? That means I feel the mother should treat the children equally. The father should treat each child in their room of honor. You know? But of course, everything is different. Everybody's different. I'm just saying, like, I mean, if you're a single parent, you need to be both those archetypes, technically. That means you need to um, um, treat the child equal, but at the same time special. Because that child is not equal when it comes to DNA. No child is equal. I mean, we can say we're all the same, but are we? Our DNAs are different. We are the same species, though, which is the cool thing. Do you know, it's as if we treat our minds as attributeless attention, if really the idea of the soul was actually entertained on a realistic level, it would imply that our biological bodies are Iron Man suits, which are also simultaneously antennas. I'm thinking that when Carl Jung said the center of the circle, which is the metaphor for God that Carl Jung is using, is everything and the circumference is nothing. I think what Carl Jung did there is that he realized the journey is between everything and nothing. Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj also realized this. Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, when I see that I am nothing, that means moments of his life where he's reduced to nothing. Imagine someone comes and reduces your worth to literally nothing. So he says, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. Wisdom is the only way you can stand when an apocalypse is happening. It's just you're watching as your nature. You know? So that means if you were like, let's say next level like martial artist back in the day walking in an apocalyptic situation, a meteor was about to hit Earth, you would probably continue your gentle walk in the garden, even though the whole world was about to stop. The simulation of it, you know. Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj, the second part of the quote, he says, when I see that I am everything, moments where there is collective victory, when you see like literally an advanced civilization, rising in 3 dimensions. Because the sky city is the evolution of the skyscraper. Because think of it this way, us thinking we want to create the highest skyscraper, right? But we can just put a skyscraper on a platform that elevates as high as it can. You know, the first skyscraper that went beyond the clouds. But it wasn't like built that big, it was just like literally elevated. I honestly think what humanity should do is we should have giant poles. Giant poles everywhere. And we should build a city that is like slides. We should actually live not on the earth, maybe like 200 meters above it. And right now, we don't have technologies for sky cities, but we know how circus tents are, how circus tents work. So if we take a circus tent strategy to all over the world and create a tent-like civilization, imagine over it, that means imagine there were these 4 giant poles and the whole city was on this giant curtain. Imagine cities were on curtains, you know? And anytime there was a tsunami, these giant helicopters would come and hold the corners of the curtain and they would lift. I mean, that would be too heavy, but I don't know. Like they're... right now, maybe we might not be capable of having, like in my vision of civilization 2.0, having that, like in 600 years, probably that we might have the power as a species to lift the whole infrastructure, like 90% of human infrastructure, up into the air. And then start the 2,000-year fast of not entering the earth, letting the earth rest with no human interference, with the least amount of human interference. You see, nature, it must be embraced. I see this in human beings, that when they look at animals like pet owners, they see a personality there. You know, I remember I asked this lady once, you know, it was as if like the discussion was in regards to eating food. And I was like, do you see a personality to your pet and like a soul to your pet? And she was like, yeah. You know, she sees a soul in the pet. Then I'm like, why do you feel human beings eat animals though? It's as if, are we so rude to the soul of that evolutionary creature? Or is it because we haven't found a strategy to bypass the content of our food? Imagine life in the future becomes like this one pill you eat and every day it gives you maximum energy. You know, or let's not even make it a pill. The healthiest thing is a drink. Like in the future, I would love to have, like, you know, in those, imagine like in like you see like a scotch glass. Imagine in it there's this liquid that is literally, when you drink this, it is not alcohol. It is something that just energizes you. You know, it's like that immortal juice I was talking about. And I don't know why, but right now I feel France. For some reason, I feel maybe French scientists may come up with this immortal juice idea first. But anyways, to complete the quote from Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj, he says, I'll just say the whole thing over. He says, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I see that I am everything, that is love. And in between, my life moves. We are a movement of states of individual, objective, meaningful minds, bodies, to unknown collective subjective minds. That means the inner realms, that's your personal gift. The cosmos is like, that's the puzzle that only you can solve. Your outer realms is the puzzle that after you solve the puzzles of your inner realms, you go to, and it's like, it's the collective puzzle. You know, it's like 8 billion people can try to solve a problem at the same time. That's the value of the outer realms, you know. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Actually, I'm going to honor Carl Jung, and I'm going to go into a quote tunnel of Carl Jung. Because why not? Why not? I mean, Carl Jung, if he was here, he would probably speak around those lines, you know. Carl Jung says, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Carl Jung says, a man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That means at those moments in life where the person is getting annoyed, just study human nature. You know, in situations where there's too much turbulence, I'm like, all right, let's just see what human psychology is doing in this world. How human eyes have opened to the world, pretty much. Carl Jung says the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's any reaction, both are transformed. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Carl Jung says, I read that. Carl Jung says, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. Yeah. You know, there is a great feeling when you can stop the anger, the rage of one hand with the mindfulness of another, you know. You stop your own violence before it ever leaves the inner realms. You know, that's the best way to get rid of anger, by the way. Anybody who gets angry, don't express it. Just let the flames extinguish in your inner realms. That means you just have to do nothing for like maybe 10 minutes and the anger is not going to exist anymore, you know. Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung says every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol, morphine, or idealism. That means you can say, like, beliefs are addiction to ideas, to subjects. It's like some people are addicted to subjects, you know. But it is very complex because everything has a subjective output. You can say they're only addicted to an unchanging subject, you know? Because if it's changing, then you can't be addicted to the same thing if it's a different thing. Carl Jung says, you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. Carl Jung says, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Wow, wow, wow. That's it. This is the algorithm to a good life. Not a good life, to an advanced life. Carl Jung's algorithm to an advanced life would be this quote I'm going to share. Share this in your social media, people, whoever's listening. Carl Jung says we cannot change anything unless we accept it. That means you can't actually experience a better life until you accept how your life is not better and do something. Then we find an ability to see new angles to do something about it. Carl Jung says, where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other. That's why the power of an advanced civilization is like a sword used to get it to a point where it doesn't need to use the sword anymore. We just want to get so advanced until then we can reset the pace of our advancement. We just want right now, it's like, you know what it is? It's like Normandy, the shores of Normandy, the Allied forces landing and being like, oh my God, what is this? Like we're being shot from the sky, pretty much, you know, because they didn't have higher ground. Like it was totally a bad deployment. It was like, but anyways, it was a rough deployment, let me say. But anyways, it feels like that to me. It feels right now that we are creatures that have a value to ourselves, but we don't know what value we have to our world. And the reason is because even the world doesn't know how to value itself. So we got to build. So right now it's the builder's era. That means life doesn't want people to repeat the past per se, only to compile and save certain technologies. I bring up the past. Really, everything should be focused about how fascinating our future is going to be. And when I say fascinating, it doesn't mean, here's the thing, we have to find a strategy where it's win-win for the inner realms and the outer realms. So the person, this is why they say when you find a work that you love doing, it's like you don't have to work a day of your life, you know? So that's the thing, where the inner realms grow with the outer realms also expanding. So it's like the outer empire kingdoms of humanity advance, and the inner realms and the inner kingdoms of humanity advance. You know? That means we are like Thor's hammer, but we are Thor's hammer in its own hand. There's like no Thor. We're like the hammer has its own mind. Can you imagine? I think that happened. I mean, I think the hammer had Odin's mind. But can you imagine somebody tried to touch Thor's hammer and suddenly a voice arose, "Don't touch me." You know, like, holy shit. You know, the hammer is like doesn't want to even. Thor can't even touch his hammer. The hammer is angry. You know. What I mean is that it's all archetype games. Everything in life, it's an alphabet. It's an alphabet of image. And it's an unknown mover in this alphabet of image. The inner realms is an internal cinematic language. That means people right now, most people, they're probably speaking through a linguistic framework. That means when they think about things, they're actually remembering sentences. But for me, the shift in speech was that I noticed that there's a film going on, that the purpose of language was to express image. So if the purpose of language is to express image, technically means the reason we are learning words in this world is so we can communicate images. So technically the mind is more familiar with a cinematic language than just the person visualizing sentences or structure to a certain format of speech. Speech is not something you can do linearly too much. That means I've tried this where sometimes sometimes I bring in a notebook and then I've made some points that I feel are so important that I have to share. And in those moments, I go off rhythm. Because speech is something that it's like you're building. It's like a symphony. It's like you're like a symphony orchestra of every word changing the image of the attention. Or changing the image that's in the attention. Anyways, I'm going to read a few more quotes from Jung and then end off. Jung says, thinking is difficult, that's why most people judge. Wow. Carl Jung says, even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. Carl Jung says nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. Wow. The unlived life of the parent. That means how big you attempted, you know. Carl Jung says, I shall not commit the fashionable stupidity of regarding everything I cannot explain as a fraud. Yeah, because it's like the unknown is unknown. There's a reason we call it that. It's because literally knowledge is like, what do you want me to do about it? I can't see that. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. To give an honest answer to is nothing around everything. To be honest, the question can be written, is everything around nothing? We can see the circle by adding higher dimensions to be a toroidal field. I personally feel that the dimensional staircase, the staircase to beyond the language threshold, is honestly we are experiencing space, which is the zero dimension. That's the unconscious's birthplace. And then we have the singular dimension, the one dimension. I call it 0, 1, 2, infinity. These are 4 symbols I use. And the 1 is the singular dimension. The 2 is the dualistic dimension. The singular dimension means that the person, like a creature, emerged. An individual popped out of nowhere. You know, as Alan Watts says, suddenly, like a tree apples, the world peopled. You know, the planet peopled. And upon the acknowledgement of the singular position, what does an individual being actually care for and want? The individual being cares for duality, for dualism. What that means is, if you're nothing, you just want to be something. If you're something, you want to be the best thing you can. That's the game of the dualistic dimension. just endless comparison through hierarchy. It never ends, yet it also the advantage of it is it's what's updating the capitalistic product line, you know. So upon the dualistic dimension, what now, the next question is, what does a dualistic creature want? Now here is where something strange is happening. This is the question where we are all asking. Language is a dualistic system, so technically as an object subject or subject object, whichever is your taste, you know, whichever you felt came first, you know, as an object subject or subject object, a phenomena, we are wondering what is beyond chaos and order, pretty much. That's the next heavy question of our evolutionary phase as creatures. Now, this is what the strange thing is. Instead of us, after dualism, going towards infinity, people have gotten tired of the dualistic system, have gone to the singular dimension, and from the singular dimension they feel it's like oneness doesn't need to do anything, you know, and so they go to the void. So you can say non-duality was the starting place. So you're actually walking backwards if you stay in non-duality too long. You are literally someone who's gone into the cave, so it's different than the outside world, so you feel a freedom, but you are going there only to get rest. You know, that means there is some beings that for enlightenment, the notion of it for them is just rest, because everything in this world is moving. That means if I was actually to identify with the world, everything is moving. So how can movement die? We say energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can change from one form to another, you know? In the laws of thermodynamics, the first law of thermodynamics. And so, we're also noticing that, guess what? We're energy conscious of itself now. And it's being conscious of itself as movement. So energy as movement can never get created or destroyed. It just transforms from form to form. So there is no death of mind, but there is death of the body, and then the fading of the echo of the body upon the mind. Energy cannot die, literally. You know, it can't die, but it can't die, but it can change. We can, like squirrels, jump from branches to branches. When speech becomes an art form, it was for the ancient Greeks, rhetoric. There was a spirit to the moment. It wasn't just words in the moment. You know, it's like there was a significance. There was something that the eyes were doing, you can say. So, anyways, guys, upon the answer to the dualistic question, so I would say this is me trying to attempt to answer the title, is nothing around everything. So that's a question that's asking what's beyond duality. The question is, upon experiencing, that means if we are street smart as a species, just smart and intelligent enough, we can just see it clearly that it's much more worth it to build a win-win advanced civilization than any sort of win-lose nature or nurture setting scenario or dilemma. That means in life, people don't realize, I think they don't realize this, you can create space. That means when I can't create something physical, I create the space to create something physical. You know? That means it's like sometimes you're becoming conscious of how you want to exist as a context in the moment before expressing yourself as a context. That context is not ideological, it's witness-based. That means we're watching the world take place within us, technically. Light's entering your eyes, folks, you know? Like the mysteries within are still remain. Beyond infinity, it goes back to the void, but it goes void that is infinitely conscious. And infinitely conscious void no longer is wearing the ring of the absent heaven. It's like karma was the way of the view of this dimension of the world, as if it's a circle, it loops. But I'll tell you, it's a spiral. That means we got to build an advanced civilization that if a child asks their parents in that advanced civilization, what's an advanced civilization? You know, the parent should look at the child, the one that is endlessly updating, which you're going to go and build and do something about, you know? And the child's like, oh my God, an advanced civilization, well, life has purpose now, because we got to create the purpose here. People, even every relationship a human being has been, is they have been a participant in the moment. You see, this is why any moment you stop participating, there's in my youth, I was so shy, I would get locked in my inner realms. I would just become like nature. Literally, I was like, I think it was a sort of samadhi state. I would go into standing samadhi. It's like they asked the person, that whirling dervish, how is it that you can spin for hours? How is it? Because the person said, the beloved doesn't get tired. Non-duality doesn't have an energy analysis to even consider it as wasting energy. So the advantage of seeing yourself as an unknown presence of attention, expressing itself as a known personality of objective caliber, let's say, uh, you know, so it's as if now we require the elegance of handling the body and handling the mind, and realizing that the hands are an opportunity to hold something. So in this life, the value of it is simply you are designed to engage it. That means even if you're a person, you're like, what meaning could this life have? You could still look at the biological design of your body and be like, okay, it's as if this is designed to at least do something. It's like just like you look at a cup, and you're like, okay, this is designed for water to be poured in it. When I look at human fingers, it's like we were designed to pick up fruit. We were designed to write, we were designed to build. So what that means is the purpose, the divine will was so divine that it allowed free will. What that means is man you can say in a metaphysical substructure, or in a monotheistic or Abrahamic sense, became relevant to the universe. Before that, it was just a farmer, and then suddenly he came and said, yo man, there's a God to the cosmos, and we're all its creation, and the guy's like, so you're telling me I ain't a farmer anymore? And the guy's like, yeah, and so it became a moment where a person became part of a cosmic event. Religion was man's first attempt to relate himself to the cosmos as a personality. You can say it was the adorable urge of a species to try to see the unknown. Baby steps. That's what religion was. The baby steps of the species. Everything is a milestone. There's no value to the system. It's as if moments come and they experience their time here and they leave. I honestly feel the way we have linearized history, it's a bit artificial. Really, how history is, I don't know. Right now, guys, I'm actually staring at like two squirrels on my lawn. And I honestly think, what's the purpose of this creature? Like, what purpose can it have? And I realize its purpose is to exist. So existentially, if you continue existing, you've completed 50% of the meaning of life. You found 50% of the meaning of life. Now, the other 50% has to do with how your free will coordinates the experience. Because right now, guys, honestly, this squirrel is just standing. It's standing on two legs with its hands in the air, and it's staring. It's just staring at the forest. That means the nature of the biological body is to process. So life is, its meaning is to process it, believe it or not, experientially. So that means it's like the only way we can live for life is actually if we live for life. Do you know that's the only way you can find the joy that is unconditional? Because if you want yourself to be happy, or if you want a conditional happiness, a happiness that comes and goes, go follow your personal desires, become a hedonist. But if you want a joy that never leaves, if you want happiness to come and this happiness never leaves, okay, it will only come if something from the world you're in advances. So imagine, what does the superhero do? Superman is probably like, he was some dude like sitting like in a farm, right? It was some dude chilling in a farm looking at the cattle, and he's like, what should I do with my life? You know? And then he like, one of the cows runs away at a fast speed, and he just flies and picks up the cow and puts it on in the thing. Imagine in the farm, and he's thinking, what should I do with my life? As if he had reached, it's like Superman had no personal problems. You know what I mean by personal? That means no physical survival. He was literally a archetype of a human being that had no fear because he was more powerful than anything. That means so many people, they see Superman's cape and they see the giant S, but they don't see Superman's psychology. That what does it mean to be powerful, and what does it mean to be among a powerful species? A species that if there was an alien invasion, we could immediately prepare. We wouldn't be like, oh no, what's happening? Oh my God, do I need to go meditate and pray to God to save us? Like, what? How do we handle this? Imagine we were advanced communicators. Imagine we were human beings that any environment we could go, we could immediately discriminate between what is an inner realm inspired activity and what is an outer realm inspired activity. For example, if you really look at what in mainstream view and psychology they see acts of extreme violence, acts of extreme violence seem to be acts where the person is locked in a room, that they feel they see a truth that nobody else does. You see, it's not that technically everybody sees a truth that nobody else does. Because we're different, we have different DNA. But I'm saying it's about the matter of the person becoming insensitive. So, for example, if my inner realm becomes more important than the outer realms, I'm not going to give a shit about my friends. I'm not going to give a shit about life. I'm just going to be like, yo, I'm here. What about it? Oh, it's like screw everybody. I lived like that till 2011. Not that savagely, of course. Way more kind-hearted than that. But but there was that mentality where I had given up on the world because I had felt I had been pushed away by the world. There was that thing too. I could totally see. We have public servants. Let's like even move past Superman. We have actual heroes right now in society doing great things. And a hero is, there's heroes and then there's heroic moments. There's momentary heroes. You can just literally go on YouTube and search like this compilation of how many people in the world have randomly saved other people's lives. In my life personally, that happened. There was a time in the UK when I had started giving these talks. I was with a friend, Chiro at the time. Ciro, I can never pronounce his name. And then we were going past this crosswalk. This was in the UK, Birmingham, where they have these giant red buses. And I'm like from, being kind of like, I don't know, I'm a very comfortable jaywalker. That means it's ridiculously like comfortable jaywalker. Because I calculate the speed, but it's not a good thing. I don't do it often, but it's just because in Iran, like everybody jaywalks technically. The order of the streets isn't that strict. But anyways, we have servants of the mind of civilization, not just the body. Doctors, everybody who's physically doing something to help their civilization advance, they are contributing to the body of their civilization. When I see a farmer, that's an honorable act. That's an incredibly honorable person. That person is helping the body of civilization. Do you know? They're helping the species in some way advance. You know what it is that we gotta treat this world like every person's DNA is like you're a unique alien, and you gotta give your gift to this world before your eyes close. Just gift it something. Whatever. It could be a kind act. It could be whatever. But I'm telling you, you could say this is a very, like video game kind of way of handling karma. But just like how in certain video games you press a button endlessly, da 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 da, do you know? Like, and suddenly you beat the opponent, let's say in a Mortal Kombat video game or like a Tekken video game. I would play this when I was young. So you would just press one button and the person didn't have a time because you were pressing that button faster than they were pressing the other buttons, because their finger had to move to the other buttons. You would win technically. Okay, it would be lame. It would be a lame victory, but you pretty much jab the guy and the guy's trying to do different techniques, So it's the same thing with karma, where if we realize something is going to be leaving at the end of this life journey, something we have now that we're taking for granted is going to suddenly be gone. Then the person realizes they have no time for any sort of ideological inner suppression. You'll start being weak you'll stop being weak to yourself. That's a transformation. And it happens experientially. Nobody can teach you some things. Some things it's like just the way you walk is your teacher. So I'm just trying to visualize, because my whole aim right now, I could say this year has been an incredible year for me. A year where I've so many ideas that were like, if I was a lighthouse, and the very important ideas were like ships, I suddenly noticed them at the edge of the ocean, you know. And it's very simple. I feel that we have to allow the whole species to become a chess master, and what that means is, in chess, we are entertaining a probabilistic reality. That means when I look at the past, oh, it's happened, I can't do anything about it. But when I look at the future, I'm like, look at how many ways I could move right now. Look at how many ways I can envision the value to a moment. Do you know there's been times where I've just unconditionally been happy for no reason, and it's made me laugh even more, you know? Where I've just been like, there's no reason, nothing, out of nowhere, it's like there's this burst. There's this burst of just no reason. And the reason it's funny to me, because usually we're looking for some reason, some sort of reasoning to have joy and happiness. We never think if it's like it has nothing to do with reason. It's like that's the value of the inner child, Um, uh, it keeps you human. If you lose your inner child, it's very easy to become dehumanized at that point. It's very easy to suddenly become possessed by a program, whether cultural, not biological, but like cultural or abstract, linguistic program. So many people, I feel honestly, their environment is like a programmer, and it programs something into their mind and they never wander beyond that program. It honestly feels like that to me. Like sometimes when I walk in the street, I could totally see where the inspiration for those matrix codes on the screen came from. Those matrix codes in the screens was showing the possibility of the reality. So the moment the dude saw Neo and saw something about the code change, he saw an impossible pattern in a possible world. So you can technically say Neo evolved the simulation. And because he evolved it, he was the catalyst, so he couldn't have been the chosen one, because he wasn't the final receiver of it. I think the chosen one is actually Smith, because everything in the Matrix becomes Smith. So Smith is the chosen one inside the Matrix. Inside the Matrix, the chosen one is actually not Neo. So Morpheus technically, I think, was wrong, but I don't know. Neo was the chosen one who got to see the chosen truth. He got to see the truth. Neo was the eyes of truth. He was like the archetype of the phoenix, really. There was a scene in Matrix where Smith, in the second one, where Smith puts his hand in like Neo's stomach, and like Neo, and there was a moment where Neo's just like the actor Keanu Reeves is pausing there, and for a second I was like, that's such a, if we just took that as a meme shot, it would be like as if Neo's like, is there a hand in my stomach right now? I feel that there is a mind to this world that surpasses ideology, language, and any sort of storification of this phenomena that's happening. Because what can you do once you attain the infinite? The infinite has no end. Technically, the only way you can evolve beyond infinity is if you transcend the notion of an ending. And in order to transcend the notion of an ending, one has to transcend the notion of a beginning. This is why Rumi says, I have lived on the edge of insanity, wanting to know, on the lip of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door. It opens. I've been knocking from the inside. That means your ending depends on how you're interpreting your beginning. And to be able to see beyond your ending means you have to see beyond your beginning as a creature. Not just hover in the middle until suddenly the curtains are pulled, you know? It's an incredible opportunity, 4 billion years, to be able to give velocity to the creature. Like, you could totally imagine for so long, like a huge time, probably millions of years, it was just random creature roaming. And for me, the different kingdoms, like the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human kingdom, the superior animal kingdom. Because for me, I honor animals. I honor animals. They are as true of an animal as we are. But I call them inferior animals because they don't know how superior they can be. The human being is the creature that is aware of its own potential. So the meaning of being a designed entity in a three-dimensional space-time continuum is most likely designed. So physically build in this life, because when you build something, you're, I don't know how to say it. It's like the meaning is in the event. We have to free the eyes of the world from the worlds that were never here. Nature, the planet is our temple. And when you go to a temple, the reason you take off your shoes is because you're taking off your ego. So nobody should enter a temple as a personality. If you enter a temple as a personality, you haven't understood why they call it a temple. That means, I remember I went to India, when every place I would go, not that it has to be something specific, of course, but I remember every temple I would go, there was a sort of simplicity. I felt like a child going into the temple. You know, I felt a sort of just entering a different space. And there's a Vishnu temple around my house where I've been to often, not recently, but often. Um, I would just go and sit I would just in my inner realms already see myself sitting somewhere the moment I would enter the room, and I would just go sit there and I would just watch. And there's something remarkable happens when you let yourself be. Everything you do recalibrates the nature of your attention. So you can say non-duality is getting a view, is like the eagle in the sky. Duality is the eagle on the branch. Both are valid. Yet now our work is more significant on the branch than in the sky, because an eagle can't fly forever. It comes down to its nest at night. So it's as if our true nest is you can say at the end of life non-duality, but for now it's duality. So because we are in the vehicle of dualism, we have to use it. So the best thing a person can do is just use your intelligence and realize, because nobody has your eyes, you have to use your intelligence. You have to actually input energetic expression in the system and not fear it. And that's how living happens, where you got to like shake off the shackles of the past. Realizing that in an instant, just like how you could refresh the browser, like of your internet, you can refresh the moment's implication. There's been moments where someone has said something, I've gotten really angry, but then I've suddenly wondered, who is this person? And then I haven't gotten angry because I realized I didn't know who the person even was who was saying something. So I had no idea how they were saying it. So I couldn't even, if I wanted to, I couldn't get angry, you know? Because that's the thing. We don't have people's inner realms. We start from our own inner realms. We get out of we mature beyond, as Terence McKenna says, ethnocentric breastfeeding. That means every person, imagine like a comet, like an asteroid or meteor that it hits Earth, but imagine the Earth's crust was made of cheese and it made a hole. So the meteor climbing out of that hole is like the person stopping the ethnocentric breastfeeding. Literally, it means that you have been thrown into the world, into a certain movement, so that you could realize you have individual consciousness. But after you've realized you have individual consciousness, it doesn't mean you have to keep going with the same programs as your past. It just means you needed some sort of prototype of individualism, and that's why the conditioning was necessary. But after the conditioning is only there to make you realize you're an individual, then after you're an individual, you suddenly see this world as a giant landscape. And the point of it is not to escape it. The point of it is to go see what it is. Imagine the planet is like a friend that you haven't seen for eons. And while you're alive, you're just, remembering all manifestation at once. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll see you in the Discord server. Much blessings and awesome.